Earlier this year, I visited Negril, Jamaica with a girlfriend. And if you have ever been here, you know how magical this place is. There is just something really special about it. There's like a salty breeze. There's a golden sunset every night. There's turquoise water. There's reggae music floating through the air. There's the smells of jerk chicken and curried goat. And my friend and I would often find ourselves in the middle of hilarious hijinks and random adventures. And so every night before bed, we would listen to the waves crash against the cliffs below our bungalow. And we made it a point every night to reflect on the day. And so we would sit on the balcony and we would eat peanut M&Ms and we would just recap the day. And sometimes there were funny memories from a clumsy cliff dive or making friends with a sea cucumber or just like a really hilarious interaction with somebody. And we would jot down these moments. And sometimes we would write down like a paragraph, like we would write about it in detail. And sometimes we would just jot down a word or two because we really wanted to capture the joy and the wonder and the tiny lessons that we might have otherwise forgotten. Because moments are ephemeral, like they slip out of our hands. And so looking back at this shared Apple Note that we have with all those recaps many months later always makes me laugh. It makes me smile. It brings me right back to that experience. And it's like reconnecting to the place and its people. And so that's the power of reflection. And we don't talk a lot about reflection in this field of marketing, if you want to call it that. But it is a really key skill or practice for social impact leaders who want to be more visible in their fields, because to share your most thoughtful perspectives and your stories and your opinions and the ideas that you hold dear, you need to first pause and notice them and reflect on your experiences. And so in this podcast episode, I'm going to be talking about how building a habit of reflection will support your thought leadership practice. And I'm going to share a ton of reflection questions and prompts that you can use to really make this habit stick. So keep on listening. Hey, I'm Tanya Bhattacharya, and you are listening to the Campfire Circle podcast. We are all about breaking down the boardroom table as the ultimate space of leadership, and instead replacing it with a campfire. Because that's where we share our stories. That's where we build warm community, and that is where there's always room. I'm building an impactful business in public through thought leadership, and I'm taking you behind the scenes all along the way. So if you want to stand out as you stand up for your mission, you are in the right place. So usually when we think about visibility or thought leadership, we think about skills like content, right? Marketing, writing, strategy, community building, algorithm, staying up to date on social media trends, and all of that kind of stuff. And all of that is output, right? And what needs to be created or what stories need to be told. But unless you stop to reflect first, what are you even going to talk about? You have to first notice why something is important before you can really share it with your audience in a way that lands. And so without this piece around reflection, the things that you put out there are usually a little bit more surface level. Posting a picture of you at a conference is something. It's not nothing. But without really taking the time to reflect on what you learned, who you met, what you did, why it was important, you're not really going to break into how you and the people in your audience can use that learning or that perspective to move forward in their work. And so building a habit of consistent reflection means that you get deeper clarity on what sets you and your work apart from others. Like you go deeper into your unique experience, not how you're better. I don't want you to hear that, but how you're different so that you can get really clear on what that is, so that you can partner with others more effectively. You know what your give is, and you know how to just link up with people better. You get a more distinct voice, which helps you stand out in the noise. Your content feels more authentic and genuine because you gave your "that was so cool" moments time to marinate before you turned it into pieces of content, right? And then the other piece about this too is reflection helps you learn from mistakes and make more informed decisions. It's really easy for something to happen. And this happens all the time. Maybe a campaign didn't go how you wanted. Maybe you got fired from a client, or you had to fire a client, or you got some negative feedback from a partner or a stake, whatever. Bad stuff happens all the time. And so instead of just keeping it pushing and going on to the next thing, taking an intentional moment of reflection helps you figure out, first of all, why and maybe how you were out of alignment with your values. Or maybe not, but it just helps you figure out what happened so that you can pivot accordingly or develop a different strategy, think about what you need to do, how you need to build a relationship with differently, essentially how you're going to have a different outcome. So that's all easy to say, but how do you actually pull out those pieces of reflection? What are some questions that you can use to guide that practice? I want to share some prompts with you, a lot of prompts with you, actually, maybe too many prompts, but some will work for you and some won't. And we're all different. So that's why I like to share a lot. But these are some prompts I want you to think about to identify the most critical, like the most juicy pieces of an event or story and why it matters. So first, what was the aha moment in this experience? Like, why does it stand out to you? Another one, how did this event or story or experience connect with my values or my purpose, right? So, or in other words, how does this experience challenge or affirm my beliefs? Maybe that's my beliefs about my work, about my industry, about my community. What about the story is relatable or impactful potentially for other people? How can this experience help solve problems that the people that I care about, the people that I speak to, the people who are in my audience have, right? And then similarly, what's an unexpected lesson that I took away from this experience? How has my mindset around this thing evolved over time, right? Can you track that? What led to this change? What perspective can I offer about this experience that most people don't think about? What patterns or themes have I noticed in my recent experiences? And what do they reveal about my focus? Who influenced my perspective during this experience? Who was important to this experience? And how can I acknowledge them and then build upon their knowledge? And then finally, if I could revisit this experience, this moment, this story, what would I do differently and why? All right. So those are all questions to ask yourself as you're debriefing from some kind of a thing that you've just gone through, something that you maybe potentially want to share, maybe not. But if you do want to share it, if you've realized, oh, this is something I do want to share with my audience, you next have to figure out how you are going to tell this in a compelling sort of way, in a storytelling kind of way. And so next, I want to share a couple of questions that can help you turn these raw reflections into storytelling content. So first of all, how can I open the story in a way that grabs people's attention? How can I set the scene to make people feel like they're experiencing this story with me? So what specific sensory details can I include? And that might be sights, sounds, smells, feelings. How can I make them feel as if they're in the story with me? What is the conflict or the challenge at the heart of the story? And how can I talk about it in a way that creates tension and interest? Who is the key person involved in the story? Maybe it's you, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's someone else. And why would the reader care about them and their perspective? What emotions do I want to convey? And what language can I use to do that? What is a broader trend or issue that this story reflects? And how can I tie this story or transition the story into that larger lesson, like for my people, for my sector, etc.? What is the core message that I want people to take away from this story? Or in other words, what is the one thing, and just one thing, not two things, but one thing that I want people to do or remember, or how I want them to be after they consume this piece of content? And then finally, an extra credit question is, when would be a good time for me to share this story again? Is there some kind of annual milestone or a certain time of year? Or does this relate to a certain campaign my organization runs where I can bookmark it and repurpose it in a year or 6 months? So these questions are going to help you think deeper and then turn maybe everyday experiences, maybe not, maybe one of a kind experiences, whatever. Turn what you're going through into meaningful conversation starters through your content. because that's the role of your content. It's meant to start conversations with your community. And so that we've talked about personal stories a little bit, but many of you work with a team of other social impact change makers. And maybe that's at a nonprofit, maybe it's at a foundation, a consulting firm, a B Corp certified business, or some other kind of mission driven organization. And so I also want to talk about creating a culture of reflection within your team, because building a reflective internal culture is going to bring depth and authenticity to your brand's voice. And it's going to make team members feel more connected to your mission and vision. So it goes both ways, right? It creates connection. Reflection creates connection. It creates a stronger culture where people, they want to show up differently. They have a growth mindset. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to get into relationship with people differently and share more innovative ideas. And I feel like I said culture a whole bunch, but that's really what it is. There's no synonym. Like, reflection builds upon your culture. And that old saying about culture, it's everything, right? So to do this, to slowly build a culture of reflection, I think one, obvious thing to do is incorporate some reflection moments in team check-ins and in meetings. Incorporate places where you can talk about team wins, I don't know what to call it. I almost said team failures, and maybe you can call it that, but places where you didn't quite hit the mark, what happened, who made it happen, who was a part of it. And as you share these things internally, that's going to, like I said, build culture, build relationship, build connection, but it's also going to bring raw material that you could potentially share with the external world in a way that your audience will care about and build trust in your organization. And so after each conversation, I do also want to encourage you, like during these things, to recap your reflections somewhere, because my story earlier in Jamaica, if we hadn't recapped them somewhere, we wouldn't have remembered them. It's very easy to move on to the next thing and forget. And so recap what you learned and what actions you'll take next. And so I want to get into some prompts. I want to get into some questions that you could ask your team to encourage reflection. And so some of those questions might be, what was the most top of mind challenge that we recently faced? And what did we learn from it? Maybe what did you personally learn from it? And what do you feel like the team learned from it? What strengths did we leverage collectively to navigate that situation? And how do we keep building on those skills? Do we want to keep building on those skills? What might that help us accomplish? And then similarly, how can we apply what we learned here to future projects that are on our horizon? Were there any assumptions that we challenged or confirmed through this experience? And what does that mean for our future approach? How did this experience shift our perspective? How did this experience either reinforce our core values, or maybe were we out of alignment with our core values? Let's talk about it. How did collaboration play a role in this experience that we just went through? And what adjustments can we make to improve our teamwork? And then maybe at the end, which of these learnings would be appropriate to share with our audience, because they maybe ladder back to some kind of a message that we have, a key brand message that we have that we want to be known for? What would our audience resonate with? Yeah, what would they resonate with? And so these are a lot of questions. If you're listening to this, there is going to be a link in the show notes to the transcript of this. And so you can visit these are all going to be written on my website. So you can check that out there. But so something that's really important to me is often we go to conferences, we listen to podcasts, we do things, and then we go into the next thing. So I want to bring it all together because I really do want you to operationalize these pieces and make reflection a part of your tasks, because that will then subsequently make your content and the ways that you're showing up in the world more resonant. So a couple of things I want you to remember is to start small. You are doing a lot of things at your organization. Marketing, if you're listening to this podcast, marketing is something you think about, but marketing is usually not the only thing that your organization is doing. And so start small. If this is something that you're trying to do personally, you could schedule a weekly reflection time, dedicate 15 to 30 minutes, and just write down one experience, one recent experience or challenge from the week, maybe a top of mind thing. Take yourself on an artist state. Get away from the computer and into a place where you feel more creative or whole, and ask yourself, okay, what did I learn this week? Or what stands out about this week? Or what would I tell insert person that you love? What would I tell this person about this week? If you are going to be doing this as a part of a team, I want you to think about holding team reflections at a cadence that works for your organization. Maybe that's weekly, maybe that's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, just depending. But use this time not necessarily to get into the work itself. You're going to be tempted to do that, but really try to keep it at the level of sharing reflections, of going into recent wins, challenges, what people learned. Use those reflection questions that I shared to go deeper. Maybe get out of the office for this or off Zoom if possible. Go on a team walk. You can incorporate this into like a offsite, into a team retreat if you work for a remote team. Another idea is to have people write down their reflections, perhaps anonymously, maybe not. That's up to you. But sometimes people are not going to be willing to share it verbally just because it's hard, right? It's hard. So create ways of sharing that enables all people to feel safer sharing what they want to share. Because that perspective is going to be really rich. It's going to be really helpful. Also, in terms of, you could also ask for audience feedback. Ask your community, your clients, your social media audience for feedback on how they see you showing up in the world, right? LinkedIn polls, Q&As, feedback forms, right? You could use Google Forms. You could use Airtable. You could use SurveyMonkey. There's all kinds of ways, relatively easy, simple ways to gain new perspectives from people who are just outside the four walls of your business or your organization. So work that in. You could also just practice social listening. So when you're scrolling LinkedIn, pay attention to top discussions. That's one of the things, if you have your notifications enabled, that LinkedIn will show you. It's, hey, a bunch of your contacts commented on this post. What does that post say? What are the trending topics in your industry? What is the membership organization of your field talking about? And instead of just reading what they share or simply reposting what they share, take some time to think about why that thing matters to you, right? Why do you care about that thing? What is your perspective on that thing? And then a content brainstorm. So set aside some time, whatever works. I'm assuming that you are either if you're an independent consultant, you get to wear all the hats. If you are the person who manages marketing at your social impact organization, this goes for you too. Set aside some intentional time to take all those notes, right? Those team reflections, your audience feedback. Look for themes, look for messages, highlight what feels really rich to you, and think about what can be turned into content that you can then share back with your audience. So you're probably listening to this in December 2024. That's when this episode's coming out. The year is about to close. What a year it was. Oh my goodness. And so what better time to get into a reflective mindset, right? So, and it can be simple. Let's do it now. All it takes is go ahead and just join me in closing your eyes for a moment. Unless you're driving, then don't do that. Keep your eyes open. But I want you to think about a recent experience. It could be a win. It could be an L. Just a top of mind experience that pops into your mind. And picture that experience. Picture where you were. Think about who was involved. Feel the emotions that you felt. And then ask yourself, what made this a success for you specifically? Or what made this a learning opportunity for you specifically? What will you learn from this experience that you're going to carry with you to inform your work going forward? And how can you build on that in community? These are just some things I want you to just reflect on. This is long term. Like this is, let this marinate. Just think about this for a while. And once some things emerge for you, feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn. I would love to hear what comes up. Excited to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Okay, so you've heard from us. Now I want to hear from you. Leaving a review helps us so much in growing our reach and supporting more folks with this podcast. And even better, I would love for you to send me a note on LinkedIn with your takeaways from this episode. I cherish and respond to every message, so I can't wait to hear from you. And if you want to go even deeper, check out the show notes to take your next step.